Hey everybody, this is Vegan Theology with Kevin and Sarah Hale, episode 72. How's it going?
Hello, Kevin. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. We're excited to be with you. We're going to start today by giving a few updates on some of the things that have been going on with us since we last talked. Pretty exciting, especially the month of August, I would say. It feels like a few things have come together or come in our lives or happened that are very exciting. The first thing, of course, is that we went to Oxford for the second time, which is a big deal.
Yeah, Oxford Center for Animal Ethics Summer School. Yeah, it's awesome, as always, and very exciting. And for me, the highlight of the year, I would say.
Yes, it is very exciting. And one of the things that was so wonderful about going back there was being able to reconnect with vegan theologians specifically whom we had met the previous year.
Yeah.
Just getting to see them again and reconnect and forming even deeper relationships. And not just vegan theologians, of course. There's many vegans from all walks of life who are there. And many of them we had met the previous year, and some of them, of course, were new to us. So it's just a wonderful experience. It's good for the soul. You know, it's a rare thing to feel like instead of being those weird vegans in the group, you feel like you're a vegan among many
Right.
vegans. And so there's a lot less explaining that has to be done. We all kind of just have an understanding of each other.
Right. Yeah, that is nice.
That is, yes. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to re-enter normal society after you've spent a few days around all vegans. And then
Right.
coming back out and realizing, oh, right. For most people, this is not something that they think about or want to think about.
You're right,
So-
right. Yeah, but this year was great. I feel like God is really moving in our lives, even in ways that we were not even anticipating,
Yeah.
and just that seem really big for us.
So we got to reconnect with Marcello Newell. A lot of you who have been listening to us know that name. We've covered one of his papers on our podcast. Also, Catherine Lowe, whom we mentioned before, who is now, we're so proud of her. Not only is she kind of new to veganism, but she's also new to Christianity.
Right.
But you would not know that when you meet her because she has devoted herself so completely. She seems like a seasoned Christian. And
Right. She's taking 2 master's degrees right now, one at Talbot Theological Seminary and one at Fuller Theological Seminary. So
yeah,
that's a big deal.
pretty amazing.
Right.
We also met some of her family, mostly her sister. Elizabeth was there at the conference quite a bit, and she is a filmmaker, a documentary maker, a documentarian who you might want to check out. She directed the film called Strays,
That was amazing.
which we came home and watched. It's free online, and it's about stray animals in Istanbul, Turkey, and it's very beautiful, very beautifully shot. In fact, it leads well into talking about our next person because you feel like it does, at least at points, focus on the spirituality of the animals,
Right.
the strays. For example, at the very end of the film, one of the last scenes you see is this stray dog that you've been following around Istanbul, Turkey for the whole film. Her name is Zeytin, and she's laying on a beach, and you hear the Muslim call to prayer in the distance. And Zeytin perks up and starts listening as well, and then she starts singing along
Right.
with the
Yeah,
cantor.
that was pretty awesome.
And it's just so beautiful. It's
Yeah.
like this moment of her having a spiritual moment almost,
Yeah.
worshiping God even. And that leads into the fact that we reconnected with Daniela Rizzo, Dr. Daniela Rizzo.
Yeah, she just published a book called Animal Pneumatology, a systematic theological inquiry into the spirit's work in non-human creatures.
Can you define pneumatology just for anybody who doesn't know
Yeah,
that
just
word?
within systematic theology, it's to study the Spirit, Holy Spirit, and I guess our spirits. It's groundbreaking. Even Andrew Lindsay endorsed it, comparing Dr. Daniela Rizzo to Karl Barth in terms of Karl Barth was a big deal in Christology, and Daniela Rizzo is becoming a big deal in animal pneumatology. So very exciting. I think as a result, because I think we're very excited about this book, we're going to pivot a little bit and maybe we're going to put down Ask the Animals, the book we're currently working through, and we're going to pick this book up and work through it and then get her on the podcast and talk to Danny. So
she's really funny among, I mean, she's brilliant, but she's also really funny because all throughout the conference, she kept giving Kevin a hard time. Like, I was just at home waiting by the phone for your call to come on your episode, come on your podcast. Because we had promised, or we had said to many of these people, like, we're going to have you on our podcast. And the year went by. So we're definitely going to have Catherine and Daniela.
This past year was a rough year, I think. So we're going to do it. We're going to get all these people on. So
also Philip and Miriam Sampson were both there and presented. And Kevin has just recently finished.
Yeah. Maybe required reading. Philip in 2018 wrote a book called Animal Ethics and the Nonconformist Conscience. That was an amazing book. It just talks about how our thinking structures are somewhat heavily influenced by our culture and our language. And if we don't have the words to express ourselves, then maybe we struggle to express ourselves. And so, fascinating book. He did a follow-up, just came out this year. It's called Nonconformist Perspectives on Animals and Language, Speaking for the Voiceless. So I picked it up while we were at the conference. Haven't read it yet, but huge book, the first one, and I'm assuming this one's going to be just the same. And we got to spend time with them and talk to them. And
yeah, we have talked a little bit on this podcast, and I feel like it's something that I think about a lot, and we could return to discuss in more depth is how important the language we choose, especially when we talk about non-human animals, is informing how we think and how we behave towards animals. We met some new vegan theologians, including Henrika Herdrum, who is from Germany and is a doctoral candidate. She also presented, and Reverend Dr. Sarah Bowen from New York City. She presented, and it was mind-blowing. It was very beautiful. We got to reconnect with Anya again and Sandra, among others. Adam Lindsay was there, and Kevin connected with him. He's the son of Andrew, who directed the documentary about Andrew that we've been eagerly
the animal
waiting
thing.
to see.
Yeah, and spoke to him. He said it's going to be available in the fall. He didn't have a specific date, but he said it should be available on iTunes.
That'd be
great.
Yeah,
and so I assume that also means Apple TV. Yeah, we'll finally get to watch the animal thing, so that's very exciting.
Yes, and all of us, our listeners, should definitely watch that too. It'll be great.
Right.
We kept hearing that people were saying, oh, this is the kindest animal ethics conference of all the vegan conferences, which was... It's the only vegan conference we've ever been to.
Right.
And everybody is very friendly.
No, but it is an interesting conference because you have a lot of lawyers and you have a lot of policymakers, and then you have theologians and philosophers and scientists, authors, all kinds of people. So, but you have people who are actually working at changing the laws or updating the laws in a lot of places, and that's pretty serious work. And it's just fascinating that all these people come together. And you get to hang with people from big animal rights, animal law organizations that we all know about. So,
and people from all over the world, really.
Right.
So it's a very special, unique experience that we're very privileged to get to experience. Let's go to the second thing that has happened recently in our lives. So this was, for me, definitely one of the highlights of the conference.
Yeah, same for me. It was huge. Yeah.
Kevin met Dr. Maureen O'Sullivan at the conference, and at some point we were all out on the green and we sat down with her. We got to sit down at the table with her, and she is a lecturer in law above the bar, University of Galway, Ireland, and Kevin just said she teaches people how to write books. She has methods for how to write a book, and that's what we need right now because, as I think we've mentioned on our podcast, Andrew Lindsay, like over a year ago now, invited us to write a commentary on his book, animal theology. And we want to do that. We've decided we absolutely must do that. That's what we're called to do.
Right, but it also seems like a big and like overwhelming task.
We've never written a book before. So.
Well.
And so
I wrote an unpublished fiction book, which should not be mentioned.
Okay. So, yeah, we were feeling a bit overwhelmed on just even how to think about it, how to begin, what the timeline is, what we should focus on, all of it. And so just sitting across from Dr. O'Sullivan and talking to her about the project was very therapeutic, but she basically gave us a very doable, actionable plan.
Yeah.
And she has been so generous to offer that as we basically what we're going to do, it sounds very simple, but the starting point is just to go back to those episodes. There's 10 episodes we did back at the end of 2023, at the beginning of 2024, where we covered this book on our podcast. And so go back, listen to those episodes, type up notes, and send them to her episode by episode, and she will give us feedback, and then we'll go from there. It was truly just so comforting to sit across the table from her and have her give us a game plan that is very clear and doable. And yeah, there's something about just like removing the emotion from something,
right,
and just getting down to like, here's your starting point. Don't think about it. I think she used the phrase, don't muck about.
Right.
Just get something down on paper, listen to the episodes, take notes. And so we've sent her the notes from the first episode, and she just emailed us back.
Oh, wow.
Kevin. I noticed when we sat down to record, she emailed us back about 30 minutes ago, actually.
Oh, wow.
With some notes, with some suggestions, and also saying that she's still willing to stick with us through this whole process.
Wow.
So we'll be
that's huge.
I know. So she's definitely going to get an honorable mention in our book, because without her, without some help from someone like her, I don't know that we would get the project off the ground.
Right. And I think, yes, the idea that one, she's being very generous, which is amazing, but also she's breaking it down. She's breaking down the task for us. So that's very helpful.
Yes. It is very interesting to go back and listen to our old episodes. I never have done that. I don't know why. I've kind of had this aversion to going back and listening to myself. But yeah, it's like, oh, I'm relearning some of the stuff that we learned as we covered Andrew Lindsay's book. And obviously, it's a privilege to be able to write a commentary on his book.
Oh, it's huge.
I think we're just seeing it as our contribution, hopefully making his work even more well-known and
more accessible,
accessible to people.
And it is interesting, again, to go back and listen to what he has done and also read, because I started reading Animal Theology again. I mean, he is kind of a genius.
Yeah.
And it's just groundbreaking and ballsy, and it's quite a work.
Yeah. So, listeners, we have started the process of writing our first book. So, our first vegan theology book. And so that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Another thing that happened is a longtime listener and supporter and an encourager of our Vegan Theology podcast, Sharon Shihab, reached out to us and said, I notice you're not really promoting yourself on social media, which we're not. That's just at the bottom of the list in terms of time we have to spend. And she is someone who has a background in that. And so she has specifically she has volunteered to take on the role of promoting specifically the Vegan's Almanac, the other podcast that we do, which is a daily 6-minute podcast. And so every single day, she's creating a post for social media that talks about what we cover on the Vegan's Almanac.
Right. That's a big task.
And it's really huge.
Yeah, so she's like our social media director, right?
I know.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And I'm really enjoying the content she's creating. And it goes in line with what you're talking about on each episode. And our listenership is growing ever so slightly, but it's growing. And so when you just think about what God is doing for us we're just doing this thing and God is bringing people our way and we're meeting people. And I feel like worth mentioning too, one of our longtime listeners, Neil Chandler, I've got to know him and he came and visited us in July. And he's also said things like, hey, you guys should promote your stuff. I mean, he said he's had a lot of good feedback for us. But anyway, he came to Bozeman, stayed with us, we hung out, and we got to know him better. And yeah, we had a good time and got to see some of the one of the sights of Bozeman.
Yeah.
And it went quick, and there was always more to do, but it was really awesome to connect with Neil, and
Yeah.
definitely appreciate him. And I've learned a lot from him. And yeah, so I feel like God has sent these people into our lives. And then the next thing at the conference, Dr. Daniel Rizzo said to me, Kevin, you should come study with me. And I was like, huh. And I know my employment situation is changing and I might now have a job that allows me to study more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think I'm taking her up on that. I definitely am. And I just know that I personally have always wanted a PhD for decades. And just raising a family and working professionally, it's just difficult to do. And I almost thought I would have to wait till I was retired, which is like crazy. So the idea that God has brought this through Danny Rizzo.
Yeah, she is a professor at Alpha Crucis University College in Australia, and they offer distance learning.
Yeah.
She's a lecturer in systematic theology, and I think you're hoping to focus on developing a natural theology.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
With a focus on animals, so like maybe a natural theology of animals, and that's can be a broad topic.
Right.
So
Like
breaking that down.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like what animals reveal about God?
Yeah, I'm very interested in pursuing that. Like, what can we know about God? And by the way, natural theology is the study of the world. And it's kind of like we break down theology in terms of special revelation and general revelation. Special is like the actual biblical text. And we always act like that is the final authority. But then everything else, like science and the natural world and our lived experience and all these things, is kind of part of natural theology and all the arguments for God's existence and problem of evil, all the philosophical arguments. And yeah, I've always gravitated toward natural theology. I've always been attracted to it. And I thought, well, especially when we're talking about ethology of animals and their lives, and we're always talking about how they're similar to us, I feel like you can't avoid the natural world, especially when it comes to animals. And I almost feel like it's kind of a bridge between the world we live in and theology or God. So yeah, I think I'd like to lean into that. And again, it's broad in the sense that, many theologians talk about animal suffering, specifically Andrew Lindsay. And, that would fall into the category of natural theology. And so anyway, I just think it would be very fascinating to find out what can we know about God through the study of these animals.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to dive into this and see what's possible. But very excited to study with Dr. Rizzo at Alpha Crucis. And, even the fact that God brought this, like, it's fascinating to me that she's Pentecostal. The university has a Pentecostal leaning. I'm not Pentecostal, and I don't care. Like, I look at this like God sent this, and there's really no question about it. And so I'm just going to do it. And be very exciting to study, research in this area of animal theology.
Yeah. And I think Kevin going through that program of study, it's only going to benefit this podcast and whatever mission God has for us moving forward for the sake of animals. So it's very exciting.
Yeah.
All right. So those are some of the things that God has been doing in our lives, and we're very thankful, and we want to be faithful to those things. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about specifically what we learned at the conference. And we're not going to be able to cover anywhere near everything, but I think it'll be interesting to discuss.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone at the conference actually goes to a presentation every session. I talked to many people who said, I have to go back to my room. I have to take a break a few times a day because these presentations are so intense. The presenters are flying through the material.
Right.
They have 20 minutes to get through their material. And then there's like 5 minutes time for question and answers. And then there's a 5-minute period where you get to go to your next session,
Right.
decide which one you want to go to and get there. And it's just one after the next after the next. It's very, very intense. It's hard to take it all in. And then you add to that jet lag, which
Right.
is a real thing.
Yeah.
And because I care for my mother here in Bozeman, and she's turning 90 this next month, I feel very, very nervous, very conflicted about leaving her and being that far away from her. So we literally get there right before the first session starts,
Yeah.
and we leave the morning after the last day. And so we don't acclimate to the
Right.
to the time zone at all, which is not great.
Right.
We're struggling. We're struggling, especially. I think I remember saying by the third day or so, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like myself again."
Yeah. No, I felt the
And it's
same.
like,
Yeah,
"Oh
but
shoot, it's almost over."
by the third day, yeah, we're kind of getting in the groove. But the first 2 days, I mean, we're waking up, or at least I'm waking up at 2 a.m.
Which means I'm waking up at 2 a.m.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sucks in that sense because the information and the speed is just coming at you. And if you're struggling with jet lag, it's
And okay, add on top of that, I'll speak for myself, but I think you're kind of the same. I'm a pretty extreme introvert, and being around people in an intense way, like even mealtime is like a social stretch for me.
oh, that's right.
So even after like breakfast, I'm kind of like worn out for all
Oh, that's
these
right.
reasons.
Because to be social, it takes a lot of energy for you.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
yes. And so like, for example, the first morning I went to breakfast and I went to first 2 sessions, and then I was like, I'm going back to our room. I am dying. And so I went to sleep and slept until lunch. So which means I ended up missing like
Oh, yeah.
5 sessions,
Yeah.
which it's like we're here. You need to
I
take
know.
advantage of it, but your body is
Right.
so it's a thing.
Yeah.
It'd be lovely if we could go a couple days early, like many
Right.
people do.
Right.
They go there a couple days early, get acclimated, catch up on sleep, and then they're much more fresh
Right.
for the
Yeah,
conference.
we got to figure something out. Seeing Andrew Lindsay's like the best. He's just so fun to be around. And I say I go there to see him, and this conference is a bonus on top of that. But yeah, he's just wonderful.
And it was a little sad because we did not see him as much this year.
Yeah.
He was not there as much as he was the previous year because
Right.
he wasn't feeling great.
Right. It was so good to see him, and he's a good time. And I work at a hospital right now, and I go back and forth in fun arguing with this nurse named Jessie, who is a big hunter and fisherman. And he knew I was going to this conference, and he kept talking about Andrew Lindsay. So he has a locker, and one day I put a bunch of like vegan animal advocacy stickers on his locker, like meat is murder, that kind of thing. And of course he took them off, but his response was to put bacon in my backpack.
Actual pieces of fried
Yeah.
bacon.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing that, he got bacon on my signed copy of Animal Theology by Andrew Lindsay. And so there's bacon grease. I know. So I told Andrew Lindsay. Of course, it was just Andrew's reaction was great. And I got Andrew to sign a book for him, his book, Why Animal Suffering Matters. In the inscription to Jessie, one of the things he wrote, I won't say everything he wrote, but one of the things he wrote was, Jessie, your bacon loving days are numbered. So I just thought it was funny. Anyway, I gave that to Jessie, and Jessie loved it.
Yeah.
And it was great, and it's got a lot of traction at work. But he actually said he read 10 pages of it, and then he's like, I can't take it anymore. But yesterday he actually said he might continue reading it, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
One of the best things about Andrew is, and one of the most surprising things for me about Andrew is how hilarious he is.
oh yeah,
And how he loves to laugh and make other people laugh.
yeah, he's awesome. So
This year was the 11th annual Oxford Summer School on Animal Ethics, and the theme was ethical strategies for animal protection. So it was all supposed to be about the strategy. How do we protect animals? What are the effective strategies? What are the not effective strategies? And so that was the mindset. And the first evening, Claire put together a panel made up of some of the members of the Oxford University Animal Ethics Society. And they showed a video. And the whole topic of that first evening is what made you go vegan?
Hmm.
Basically, how do we convert people? How do we get others to see animals? And I was interested to know that a couple of the people mentioned literature that they were exposed to, that there was something about what they read that really captivated them and led to them becoming vegan. And that's where I learned about this book called The Wonderful Adventure of Nils by Selma Lagerlof. It's a 1906 book, and it's an award-winning book originally in Swedish. But one of the people on the panel said that that's something that her parents read to her when she was little. And she feels like that directly led to her ending up being a vegan. A lot of them just talked about how they were just going along and they just had this moment of clarity, which I think is really interesting. It's that to me feels like divine intervention.
Yeah.
Like, why do some people just have a moment of clarity and other people don't? That doesn't seem like something we can necessarily control very much. But I know that both of us, we've come back to one comment that was made that first night. It was made by a gentleman named Malcolm. I don't remember his last name at the moment, but he made the comment, which on the face of it sounds very, very simple, but it can be profound. He said something along the lines of, the animals don't care why you're not eating them. In other words, they don't care if you are an abolitionist or a welfarist, or if you're not eating them because you're concerned about your own health, or you're doing
Right.
or you're doing it for the planet.
Right. Whether you're plant-based or vegan, like they don't care.
Whether it's for religious reasons or whatever your motivation is, they just don't want to be eaten.
Right.
They don't want to be exploited. They don't want to be abused.
They don't want to suffer.
And I think the reason that we have come back to that comment a few times is, unfortunately, there really is a fair amount of infighting within the vegan community and a lot of disagreement on what's the right way to be a vegan and what's the right way to be an animal activist, which is really unfortunate. It reminds you of some of the infighting that we see in the church, right? Where people argue about the right way to do church or the right way to be a Christian or whatever. And I think to come back, I really do feel like it's a clarifying marker to keep your eyes on, that if you're doing anything to help the animals, do it. You should not be criticized by other people who are doing something for animals. The animals don't care.
Right.
The animals need all of us.
Right.
With all of our different voices and with all our different perspectives to speak up for them.
Right. I agree with you. And I think it's not an either or. It's not like you're a welfarist or you're an abolitionist. I feel like for me and for us, and I think, and we keep talking about ethical dilemmas, it's you're an abolitionist and there might be situations where you just got to do your best. So you're both. You're an abolitionist and a welfarist. And the goal is abolition. But the thing is just because you join some welfarist doesn't mean you're welfarist, right?
Yeah.
And that's a whole thing. We're not really defining those terms, but
Well, I was thinking even in law specifically, like I feel like lawyers understand this very well. You push through a legislative piece that protects one group of animals in one particular situation, but the idea is that we build on that.
right.
And just recently on the Almanac, I discussed William Wilberforce, and he's best known as being the person in Britain to really push forward abolition of slavery, enslavement of humans, but he also stood up for animals. He's another example of, let's break down the whole mission into steps, because first he pushed for the abolition of the slave trade. And so the first victory that he achieved was no longer having any UK ships be involved in the slave trade, right? And then secondly, it was outlawing enslavement in all British colonies was his goal. So even in a situation like that, there's an example where we take it step by step by step,
Right.
instead of thinking that it's all or nothing. Or
Well, and that's because we work in this system with empire, and empire's dictating, capitalism's dictating all this exploitation. And so sometimes we have to chip away. Do we want it to end tonight, tomorrow, today? Yes, absolutely. But we have to fight the battle however we can.
Yeah. The first morning, Tuesday morning, there was a large group lecture given by Professor Lindsay Hamilton, who is chair of Animal Organization Studies, School for Business and Society, University of York. Her talk was titled Strategy 101, an introduction to strategy for animal academics and advocates. And what I got from her talk was that she was saying, okay, the strategy should be, first of all, we identify the goal that we're working towards and work backwards from there, breaking it down into the necessary steps that we need to have happen to reach that big goal. And the example that she gave was that there was a scheduled opening of the first octopus farm in Spain, which we were talking about at the conference last year. And that project was shelved. The company has decided not to open an octopus farm in Spain. And so she was hypothesizing that, like, what led to that? What were all the little steps along the way that led to that? And so in her example, she talked about how there were many academic papers published on sentience about a year ago, which brought sentience into conversations in general parlance and in media coverage. And then that led to more public debate. And the plans to open this octopus farm became more public. And somehow that led to the company deciding not to open the octopus farm, which on one level is very inspiring, because I think I always need to remind myself that ideas do change the world.
Right.
And so just having the ideas published led to more awareness, led to more conversations and debate, actually led to something not happening that we didn't want to have happen.
Well, I know My Octopus Teacher, that documentary came up at the conference, and I'm trying to remember if it came up in this, but
yes,
I mean, I think that influenced a lot of people.
She did mention that documentary happened to come out right around that time as well, which opened a lot of people's eyes to care about octopuses.
Octopi.
I know we say octopi, but even in the books you read, they say that actually the correct way to say it is octopuses.
Is that right?
Yes.
No.
But I know whenever you say octopuses, people look at you like you're weird. So that was the first strategy conversation. Then I went to, and I hesitate to bring this one up because Kevin started questioning me about it, and I realized that I don't fully understand the science behind this, but I went to a biologist's presentation, and I do want to at least mention it because it was intriguing, even though I didn't completely understand it. Dr. Lindsay Marshall, who is Principal Science, Animal Research Issues, Humane World for Animals, is where she is professionally located. Her talk was called Animal Testing Without the Animals, the Role of Animal-Derived MPS, which stands for Microphysiological Systems, and Regulatory Science, which is product testing. So basically using these microchips on which the DNA and cells from different organs are placed so that products can be tested on these chips instead of on live animals. And she was talking about how the macaque specifically, who are primates, they're endangered specifically because of how much they're used for biomedical research.
Wow.
And she also talked about how human organelles and human systems can be put on a chip as well. They call it human on a chip, which is so much better for product testing than animals because there is an insurmountable species difference or many species differences between different non-human animals and human animals. And so if we're going to be testing products, it seems like we should be testing them on human body systems and organs rather than animal ones. And so I remember her saying, instead of having a monkey in a cage, we can have a monkey on a chip to test products on. Now, again, I don't fully understand the science behind how they acquire these cells, but it does sound at least like it will have less animals being exploited for product testing and biomedical research. I also went to a talk given by Teresa Habib Marigi, who talked about the current situation regarding animal protection in China. And I want to say that this presentation had a lot of overlap with another presentation I went to later on the current situation of animal protection in Japan. And I was thinking, most likely a lot of the things they covered probably have a lot in common with animal protection in a lot of developing non-Western countries. Because basically the trend we see is that meat consumption is increasing in these developing countries as the, quality of life, the standard of living increases. People want to eat more meat. And so that's something we have seen worldwide, that eating vegetables and plants is seen as the poor man's diet. It's like the poverty diet. And as people gain status economically, they believe that a right of that increased standard of living is eating more animals. And so that's happening in China, in Japan, and other developing countries. In fact, in China, she mentioned, and many of us have seen pictures, there's even these pig farms that are skyscrapers, these factory farms that are like 26 stories high. So clearly their meat consumption has increased. So in China, the word shizu is used for vegetarian, but literally it just means to eat plain. The word was used by 5th century Buddhist monks specifically, but also just Buddhists at large, to mean modesty and to be anti-gluttonous and anti-excessive. And in 511 AD, Emperor Wu of Liang made it illegal for Buddhist monks to eat meat. The whole ethic just reminded me of asceticism within Christianity, this idea within early Christianity that to live a life of modesty and kind of minimalism and not excessive or gluttonous. So the fact that we have that in common with Buddhists is really interesting to me. So she talked about how Chinese students either see veganism as Buddhist, a Buddhist practice, or in a contradictory way, they see veganism as Western influence. And they're like, well, we're not Western. And they have this national pride that says, we don't want to be vegan because we're not Western. So on the one hand, they see it as ancient Buddhist, which a lot of them don't want to be associated with. And on the other hand, they see it as Western influence, which they don't want to be associated with necessarily, which is the same way they often see environmentalism and gender issues. Like it's just Western influence coming in. But the irony there is that it's European colonialism all over the world that has brought in animal farming and animal consumption. So that's the real Western influence, is farming and eating all of this animal flesh. The other irony is that around the world, veganism is seen as poverty eating or the poor man's diet, whereas in the West, the argument against veganism is you have to be rich and privileged to eat that way. It's too expensive to be vegan. It's like, come on, can we just get our story straight here? So the message overall is that we need to communicate that veganism is universal and veganism is intertemporal, that it's for all places at all times. It's just the right way to be human. I went to a presentation by Professor Qian Hui Li, Professor, Department of History at National Cheng Kung University in Taiwan. She talked about slaughter reform in late 19th and early 20th century England, where my takeaways from that where that technology is never neutral. Sadly, she talked about how when it comes to slaughtering animals, the more wild the animal is, oftentimes the more they struggle. And so the more suffering they endure.
Yeah.
Whereas the more domesticated animals are more docile and more trusting. And so there's less suffering, which is, it's so sad, right? Because
Yeah.
there's like such a betrayal
100%.
with these domesticated animals who have come to trust the humans who take care of them. And so they tend to be very trusting to some degree that they're not going to be hurt. And then that is betrayed. But what is interesting, as we know, is that public ignorance of slaughter shields the horror. It's always done in unseen spaces, whereas getting people to see it, as we know, activists strive to get eyewitness accounts of what happens to animals out there. But in 19th, 20th century England, the activists would pass out pamphlets and have public exhibitions. And then in 1928, we had the first law about slaughter, which happened in Scotland. The captive bolt gun had been invented, and Scotland made it mandatory to mechanically stun animals. And what was interesting, and this came up a lot in the conference, is that unfortunately, when there is a slight improvement to animal welfare, like an animal being stunned before they're slaughtered, what happens is the public conscience becomes assuaged or pacified that, okay, now it's okay. Now we don't have to feel guilty. Now it's not horrific. We've done our job and we go on our way. So it's some suffering has been reduced, but in a way, it kind of locks that in a way that we're not going to keep moving forward for animals. And so I think that's one of the biggest criticisms of welfare strategies is that people become numb at that point. They become like, oh, okay, the way we're doing it is okay. It's humane.
No, and I get that.
Along some of the same lines, we went to a presentation given by Taylor Waters, who's with AVA International, which stands for Animal and Vegan Advocacy International. And her talk was titled Time Bias and the Future Possible.
Yeah, this was interesting.
So if I could sum it up, I'll try to sum it up. Basically, she started by talking about the cage-free hen campaign and how, again, we have a situation where it may have calmed down people's consciences, but the net effect is that it has not affected how many hens are killed.
Right.
And she talked about how we didn't think to ask for more. We just asked for the hens to not be kept in these teeny cages, and we could have asked for more.
Right.
And so she asked us to consider, what are we phasing in, but also what are we phasing out? What are we locking in with this proposal? What does it make possible, or what does it make permanent? And so she talked about how we need phase out dates written into the laws,
Right.
an end date, and then again, work backwards from there. So her proposal is that we tell animal agriculture in our proposals that they need to be getting animal substitutes market ready because there is going to be an end date to animal agriculture.
Right. Yeah, it was
That's what
fascinating.
I took away from it. I don't know
Right.
if you remember more.
I will say this was a presentation. She had an amazing slide deck and she was flying through it. And I was, again, jet lag. I was trying to like keep up. And it was like, I asked her for a copy of it and she gave me a copy and I've been going through it. And it is fascinating. Almost every slide's got some amazing information. I feel like her presentation deserves a whole episode, but it was interesting. There's so many takeaways. She says we do a great job of dealing with the present, with our policies and laws, and we have great goals for the future far out, but we have a hard time quantifying and kind of thinking through and strategizing like a few years out, like 10 years out or something. And so I think, yeah, the big takeaway, I just want to do the whole presentation justice, but was that kind of what you just said, that for all the effort that we've put in from advocacy to laws to policy, animal agriculture is still increasing.
Yeah.
Animal proteins. In fact, we're moving to, there's a projection by, I think, 2033 that we're going to be using even more animal proteins from, of all things, insects.
Mm-hmm.
And insects are being fed to animals, to sea animals and to pigs and things like this. And one of the benefits of that, insect protein is even replacing plant protein like soy because it can be stacked vertically. So it takes up less land. And insects don't require as much water. But the use of insects is going to skyrocket. And I mean, there was so much in this that, again, we're not doing it justice, but it was a fascinating presentation.
The idea that we could ask for more. We need to always have in mind with whatever advocacy we're doing, how can we keep going? How can we keep it going? Instead of like, oh, we took a step and then we're stuck here. But
Right.
let's figure out how to keep the steps coming.
Right.
To actually make progress for animals.
Yeah, this was such an amazing presentation. We should ask her to come on at some point, I think. No, it's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can tell that she's been in this. She's been thinking through this. She's got some wisdom. She's got some experience. I mean, the people that show up at this conference, I don't think this little episode is doing justice to all of this or any of it, but we're just giving you the highlights. And we're skipping over people, and we didn't even go to all of them because it's impossible because they're double stacking the presentations. But these people are professionals, and they're just deep in the fight. And yeah.
I went to a presentation by Tobias Lehnert, which is really exciting because I had just talked about him on the Vegan's Almanac a few days prior. And I'm like, wait, Tobias Lehnert is here?
And it's his birthday while we were there.
It was his birthday. Yeah, just before the conference started.
Yeah.
He is co-founder of ProVeg. He has worked extensively with Dr. Melanie Joy. He created a meat-free day in his town in Belgium. So very interesting guy. He and his wife own and run an animal rescue sanctuary. But his talk was titled Making Compassion Easier, a strategy for achieving vegan critical mass. So he asked the question at the beginning, how do we get a vegan world? He was pitting against each other the moral arguments and idealistic attitudes of creating a vegan world for getting people to go vegan for all the right reasons, which is for the animals, versus a more pragmatic approach of doing what actually works, is how I think is fair to say how he would present it. And so he asked the question, is it always necessary to change a person's beliefs and then they will change their behaviors? Or is it sometimes that if we start changing behaviors, that will lead to a change in beliefs, which I think is a fair point. I think a lot of people start changing the behaviors, even they become vegan for physical health, their own personal physical health, and later along the way, they become awakened to what's going on with non-human animals, and so they start to change their beliefs. And so he's saying, should the call to action be go vegan for the animals, or should the call to action be reduce animal products for whatever reason? And he was talking about how we need to make alternatives to the carnivore diet plentiful and ubiquitous. Like we need a lot of alternatives that are affordable and readily available and delicious, and make the effort to eat that way very low. Like if we look at it that way, we're going to get more and more people to just start changing their culture, basically. And then from that, people will start to change their thinking. So he did a really great job, and it was very provocative and entertaining. And so it was fun to meet him. Skipping over a few for the sake of time, I really enjoyed Ruthana Slob's presentation. She's a doctoral candidate in applied theater at the University of Victoria, Canada, and her talk was entitled Ethical and Embodied Inquiry into the Moral Status of Animals Within the Realm of Applied Theater. Applied theater is theater for social change. Applied theater is for the participants. It's not for any audience. It's exercises you go through, like theater exercises you go through that change the participant. They're not produced for an audience. And she was talking about how to use applied theater to amplify the voices of the oppressed. It's participatory performance practice. And then she led us through a guided meditation, which I found very compelling, in which she asked us to imagine a non-human animal and just imagine what they see and what they hear and what they do. And the way she did it was very compelling, I thought. She has published a deck of cards of all these applied theater exercises, which you can find at Nest of Kin, NEST of kin.com. And I thought, there's so many applications for this. I want to get that deck of cards. We went to a presentation about sanctuaries given by Dr. Zipporah Weisberg from the University of Ottawa, Canada, and it was co-given with Dr. Carlo Salzani, who's from the University of Innsbruck, Austria. Blessed Beasts, Sanctuaries, Strategy, and the Sacred. And they just talked about how sanctuaries have symbolic power to shift the focus from the violence to the peaceful, positive existence of non-human animals. Sanctuaries play a central role. There's hands-on work with animals. Sanctuaries are an act of solidarity with the oppressed. They are a model for multi-species communities. Sacredness can be mobilized as political. This is a sacred space. I think that's really powerful to think about. If you think about what's going on spiritually on land that is devoted to a farm, an animal exploiting farm, a factory farm, what's going on spiritually on land that's devoted to being a slaughterhouse, a place of slaughter, versus what's going on spiritually at an animal rescue sanctuary. There's definitely something spiritual to be said about those places. And so it fired your imagination to listen to this, that we can dream of a world, we can visualize a world in which there's more and more sanctuaries for animals to just live out their lives in peace and love, being cared for by humans and not exploited in any ways, and a world where there's fewer and fewer farms and slaughterhouses. I have to mention Christina Warner. She's a barrister and she's founder of Ruby's Law. So this is like a legal strategy. Ruby's Law is a piece of legislation that aims to reform domestic abuse and family laws to explicitly protect household pets who are frequently threatened, harmed, or used as leverage by abusers to control their victims. She did a really great job with that presentation. We, of course, went to Dr. Daniela Rizzo's presentation. Her talk was titled Toward a Theological Ethic of Creaturely Listening, Animal Theology in an Age of AI. And she talked about how AI is endeavoring to hear animal thoughts. And so she asked the question, are we capable of responding faithfully to what we hear? So this AI, it's not exactly like Google Translate. AI is processing all the variables and it deduces interpretive hypotheses. It finds recurrent structures in animal language like in sperm whales. But she talked about how listening is never a morally neutral act. We could choose ethical listening, and being able to know animal thoughts would magnify our responsibility. And so she said the three things we need to think about as faithful Christians is, have we learned how to spiritually listen? Because listening is never passive. And we're called to listen to the marginalized. And she talked about how listening is solidarity with the marginalized. And she encouraged the idea of fasting as a practice, because when we refuse to participate in empire, we are resisting empire by fasting.
Right, that was fascinating.
And in fasting, the listener is reshaped. And she also said that we need to practice Sabbath, Shabbat. Sabbath is liberation. Sabbath is remembering that life is not about production for ourselves or for the non-human animals around us. In Sabbath, we learn God's purposes for creation. So I thought it was really interesting how she tied in fasting and God's command to take a Sabbath,
Right.
which again, when God commanded Sabbath, he included
Animals.
the marginalized humans, the slaves and servants, and the non-human animals, that they all need to take a day where they don't have to work. So Dr. Reverend Sarah Bowen presented with Patricia Dennis, who is the co-founder of Animal Culture magazine. And they were talking about grieving, how helping people grieve the suffering and deaths of non-human animals can be transformative. Actually, the last day for me, a lot of the presentations I went to were focused on the transformative strategy of grieving in terms of how it can form people. It can wake people up. It can open people's eyes to animals. What I loved about their presentation is they showed a lot of the artwork by Jane O'Hara, which was just breathtaking art. She's an artist who is an advocate for animals. They opened with this piece of art by Jane O'Hara called Twilight, which showed a deer at twilight entering traffic on a very busy freeway. And all you see are the headlights and the brake lights of all these cars. And this deer is endeavoring to cross the highway.
Yeah.
But you can already see in this painting, the spirit of the deer is ascending to God. And so you know the deer is about to perish.
Yeah,
it just took my breath away.
Yeah, the art is very provocative. Check out janeohara.com and you can buy the book.
The book called Beasts of Burden contains a lot of this art.
But you can learn about her. She's got some really amazing art.
But
and she's vegan.
They talked about how if an animal is grievable, it will lead to them being protectable. And that when we allow the grieving of animals, we allow people to realize that animals are spiritual beings. They have spiritually meaningful lives. And so they help people grieve the loss of their animals. And yeah, their presentation was definitely one of the highlights.
For sure.
We went to, of course, Dr. Philip Sampson's presentation, where he talked a lot about how language matters, how we've used language to pacify ourselves around animal exploitation. We need to change our language. And someone there brought up, I've always been looking for an equivalent to the word dehumanize, something for animals where we take away their value. And someone said, I use the word de-individualize, which I liked. Henrika Herdrum talked about animal theology as a transformative strategy. I really like how she pointed out the differences between eco-theology versus animal theology. Eco-theology at its root is still very selfish and human-centered. Like, we want to protect the planet so we can survive. Whereas animal theology is more others-focused. We want to change our theology to consider others. Natalia Doran, who is the director of a sanctuary called Urban Squirrels.
Yeah.
She did an amazing presentation called The Conception of Death in Policy Making. This was a very philosophical conversation.
Yeah, this was an amazing conversation.
I'm trying to go quick because I know we're running out of time.
No, I know. But
yeah, she was talking about how we focus so much on the suffering of living animals. It's almost like we don't give enough weight to the death of animals. That death should be a separate category of harm. Instead of just kind of thinking like death is kind of a neutral thing, especially if it happens quickly and painlessly, that death is the destruction of that which is irreplaceable. Each death matters. She talked about the ontology of each individual being. I feel like there's so much to be said here. And I did email her and ask her for her notes because it was so rich. But she talked about Bishop John Zizulius, who defined personhood as the ability to have relationships, which of course non-human animals fit into that category. They're able to have relationships, which requires consciousness and sentience.
Yeah, that's huge.
She was such a great speaker. The thing with her, she just had this most organized, logical presentation, and I don't think she looked down at her notes once.
Right.
She just went, and it was
Yeah, she was
amazing.
very articulate. She knew her philosophy. It was a fascinating presentation.
Yes. We went to many other presentations.
Catherine Lowe, she gave an amazing presentation. It was
Yes.
a nice little method.
Yes. Practical theological reform as a structural lever for global animal protection. So, again, this idea that if we can correct our theology, it has so much potential for changing the hearts and minds of humans, that theology can bring moral transformation, which would lead to animal protection.
Right.
So, yeah, again, we're going to talk more with Catherine Lowe for sure. So, I think after going through these and looking through my notes, it was really helpful for me because you get home from a trip like that and it's just all a big blur. But having to go through my notes and remembering what was offered and remembering what I learned was really helpful. And I was talking to Kevin about it, and I think we come back to this idea that we need all of us. We need the lawyers, the philosophers, the theologians. We need the authors, the veterinarians. I didn't even talk about the presentation given by a veterinarian,
Right.
and how the training for veterinarians needs to be reformed. We need plant-based chefs. We need theater people. We need pastors, sanctuary people. We need scientists and artists and politicians and musicians, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we need every voice to use their own unique gifts, their own unique education to speak for animals, to make the world a better place for non-human animals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating conference. I think the highlights, obviously we flew through this, but just the relationships we build there, right? And just over dinner and breakfast, it's just a wonderful conference.
Mm.
And
little slice of holiness
it
and
is.
paradise.
It's wonderful. It is so wonderful. Can't wait to go back.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening.
I hope that something in this inspired you to pursue one of these people or their work, or how it applies to your particular animal advocacy. Thank you for being here, as always, and have a wonderful day.
Yeah, peace out.